Today I will be reading 2 Samuel 17 through 29. Then King David went in and sat before the Lord, and he said, "Who am I, sovereign Lord, and what is my family, that you have brought me this far, and as if this were not enough in your sight? Sovereign Lord, you have spoken about the future of the house of your servants, and this decree, sovereign Lord, is for a mere human. What more can David say to you? For you, servant, for you know your servant, sovereign Lord. For the sake of your word and according to your will, you have done this great thing and made it known to your servant. How great are you, sovereign Lord? There is no one like you, and there is no God but you. And as we have heard with your own ears, and who is like your people Israel, the one nation on earth that God went out to redeem as a people for himself, and to make a name for himself, and to perform great and awesome wonderful wonders by driving out nations and their gods from before your people, whom you've redeemed from Egypt. You have established your people Israel as your very own forever, and you, Lord, have become their God. And now, Lord God, keep forever the promise you have made concerning your servant and his house. Do as promised, so that your name will be great forever. And the people will say, "The Lord Almighty is God over Israel, and the house of your servant David will be established in your sight." Lord Almighty, God of Israel, you have revealed this to your servant, saying, "I will build a house for you." So your servant has found courage to pray this prayer to you. Sovereign Lord, you are God. You are convenient and trustworthy, and you have promised these good things to your servant. Now be pleased to bless the house of your servant, that it may continue forever in your sight. For you, sovereign Lord, have spoken, and with your blessings, the house of your servants will be blessed forever.
Morning, church. So that speech is given by David after he becomes king. If you're not familiar with the David story, it's in the book of Samuel. If you haven't read Samuel, it's one of the best stories in the Bible. I mean, it's just a good story in general. The fact that David becomes king is a little bit of a miracle in itself. It's kind of like the Cinderella story. Y'all know the story. The prince goes throughout the kingdom looking for somebody who can wear this slipper, and he ends up at Cinderella's mother's house, or his Cinderella's stepmother's house. And we know he's looking for Cinderella, but he doesn't know that. And he goes to the ugly stepsister. I'm not sure if she's ugly, but he goes to the stepsisters and says, "Hi, can you fit in this slipper?" And one is too big, and the other one is too small, and it's not the stepmother. And he says, "Do you have any more daughters?" And the stepmother says, "Nope. That's all I got." We know that she's locked in the broom closet upstairs. Kind of the same thing for David. The book of Samuel begins with a prophet named Samuel. That's where the book gets its name, is Samuel. And then it goes through King Saul. And in chapter 16, you meet David. And it's kind of like this Cinderella thing. God tells Samuel, "I'm tired of this king we currently have. I want you to go find somebody else." And so Samuel ends up at this house of a man named Jesse. And he has Jesse bring out all the boys, and Jesse lines them up. And so Samuel starts with the first one, the eldest. And this dude looks the part. He looks like Jason Momoa almost. He's 6'5". He's got the beard, he's got the hair and the man bun. Massive. And he thinks, this guy's got to be it. And whatever text or whatever bell or whatever is supposed to happen that Samuel knows this is the king doesn't happen. God doesn't say this is it. So he waits for it. God, are you sure? Because this dude looks like the king. And God says, that's the problem. He looks like the king. I don't want that anymore. I want something different. Keep looking. So he goes to the next son, and the next son, the next thing. It goes all the way down the line. And whatever thing is supposed to go off doesn't happen. And he says to Jesse, are these all the boys you got? Jesse says, yeah. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. We got one more. We got David. Oh, okay. Well, why didn't you bring him? Because he's with the sheep. You don't want David. He's a kid. Go get him. They have sat down to eat, and they have forgotten to invite David, which gives you some idea of how his father thought of David. Maybe it was his age that made them think that way. Maybe David was just too preoccupied with writing poetry. Maybe it was that he was too preoccupied with his harp playing. Whatever it was, his dad didn't think too highly of him. But they bring David in, and they bring him in from the sheep pen, and he's likely smelling like sheep. If you've been around sheep, they stink. And he says, what's going on? And Samuel gets the text, or he gets the ding in his brain, and says, that's him. Anoint him. And so Samuel anoints David. And as far as we know, that's all that happens, but they have just witnessed Cinderella becoming president of the United States, basically. And then Samuel goes on his way, and David goes back to the sheep pen. Now, we get an impression that David's brothers don't think too highly of him either, because his first assignment, David, comes on this international scale. There's this 9-foot giant in the Middle East who's causing all these problems, and he's making all these threats. And so David goes out to visit his brothers who are in the army, and these videos of Goliath are going viral right now. And so David decides he's going to go watch. And he stands at the hill, and he watches Goliath, and Goliath keeps making these challenges to anybody who will come fight him. And if somebody can fight him and win, then this whole war is over. Well, one of the videos that's going viral, David decides to stitch his own response to and put it back on TikTok, which is he films himself saying, I don't see the big deal. This guy's nothing. Are we seriously? We've been here for 40 days and we're not going to do anything with this guy? Well, David's brothers find the video and they say, David, what are you doing? You're embarrassing us, man. And David says, I'm sorry. I think you guys are embarrassing yourselves. How has nobody shut this guy up yet? We're God's army, man. Do something about it. To which they just reply, David, man, go back to writing your music, dude. Just go home. Shut up. And so David does exactly what he thought should have been done in the first place. He kills the giant. And that video goes viral. People love it. David rises to stardom like that. He ends up going from the sheep pen to being in the inner council of the president himself. David has now found himself a whole new way of life, and there is nobody in the land who is more favored than David, not even the president. And that's a problem. Saul, who is the current king, decides he's going to wake up one morning and turn on the news, and he's got CNN and Fox going at both the same time, and he sees them talking about David. And he hears lines like, yeah, you know, Saul he's been president for a great term, but can David give us 2 great terms? And Saul cuts the TV off. I'm not having that. And then people start writing music about David, and this song is climbing the charts. And it's got lyrics like, Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his 10,000s. No, we can't have that either. And so Saul decides that it's time to do away with David. Saul seems to trust more in the people than he does God. And he becomes battered with crippling anxiety over what to do. And so he decides he is going to run David out of the house, and David's fall is as fast as his rise. In chapter 18 of 1 Samuel, David loses his job. In chapter 19, David loses his wife. In chapter 20, David loses his best friend and most trusted advisor. David's trusted advisor was Samuel, the Supreme Court justice. His wife was the president's daughter. His best friend was the president's son, Jonathan. And David loses it all. And by chapter 21, Saul has run David out of the house, and he has lost his self-respect because now he has a contract on his head, and he ends up in enemy territory with the Philistines, foaming at the mouth, trying to act like he's insane because he feels like maybe I can get better protection if I'm in the enemy territory. David has nothing. And yet, by the time that we read the passage that was read to us this morning in 2 Samuel, David's king. How? How do you go from losing everything, from being hated by the president of the United States, being hated by the government, having a contract on your life, to now being the king? It doesn't make any sense unless there is a divine intervention. And David knows that, which is why you have that great line in the beginning of chapter 7. Who am I, O sovereign Lord, and what is my family that you've brought me this far? David has everything. He has everything that a king could ever want. If you compare David and Saul's reign, Saul is king over this loose confederation of 12 tribes. When David gets it, David makes a kingdom. Saul rules under a tamarisk tree. David rules from a palace, a capital city. Saul lives in a tent. David gets a nice house. When David is king, he defeats the Philistines, Moabites, Amorites, Assyrians. David lays waste to all of them. He is such a good king that even his enemy, the Philistines, come looking for a job from him. That's in 2 Samuel 16. Things couldn't be any better for David. And that's why he says this. Why me? Why have you blessed me this much? I kind of feel like David sometimes. I think we might all feel that way. I have a nice house. I have nice stuff. I have a great family. And David kind of gets the impression that maybe he should pay it back. Maybe he should do something nice for God. And so David says, I got an idea. And he brings his prophet in, Nathan by this time, and he says, hey, I'm gonna build God a nice house. And Nathan says, okay, cool, man. You're king. You do whatever you want. Good. Let's get started on that. And so Nathan goes home. He puts his keys on his desk, and there's this ominous figure sitting in the dark by the. That doesn't happen because God's not sitting in the dark by the window. But God comes to Nathan and says, hey, you telling David to go ahead and build a house for me. Let's back that up. I need you to talk to him for me. And so God lays out some thoughts for David to consider. He says, David, you know all that stuff that I did for you? Do you think I needed a house to do it with? Do you think I needed a house to bless you with? The kingdom that I have made for you, I didn't need a house to do that in. I have gone from place to place to place for a long time in a tent. I'm fine the way it is. But I appreciate the favor. Thank you. But I don't need what you're wanting to build me. Let me be God and let me bless you. It is not your job to bless me. And I have to tell you, that to me is a very hopeful and encouraging message. Let God be God and let him take care of the blessings. Anybody ever watch Friday Night Lights? 2 people. Wow. Okay. Okay. Well, I got a cool story for you if you haven't seen it. There's a great scene. One of the characters, it's probably midway through the show. One of the characters decides he's going to go to college. And him and his mom didn't factor in how much college is going to cost. So he comes back home from break he comes back home from break, and he discovers his mom has gotten 2 jobs. And he says, why do you got 2 jobs? And she says, somebody's got to pay for this. Huh. Okay. Scenes play out. We come back to them. He comes and says, hey, I think I'm going to drop out of college. You going, what? I think I'm going to drop out. Why? Because you don't need to have 2 jobs to pay for me to go to college, Mom. It's my job to take care of you. Son, I didn't have kids so they could. I didn't have kids so that they could take care of me. I had kids so I could take care of you. You let me be your mama, and you going to college. Now, if you want to work at Applebee's, that's a respectful position. But you ain't dropping out because I got to take 2 jobs. You let me take care of you. And I can hear God in that. You let me be God. You let me take care of you. And David says, okay, well, if I can't bless God, Can I bless somebody else? And so he calls in his advisors and says, hey, you guys remember my best friend Jonathan, my old roommate? They say, yeah. Did he have any kids, any family? Let me take a pause for a second. Usually in monarchies, when the king dies, in older monarchies, not now, in older monarchies, when the king dies, what usually happens to the family? Anybody know? Like you just kill them, because you can't have sons of the previous king hanging around, because they might decide to take the throne from you. So you just do away with anybody who's left. Okay. Saul and his boys die in battle at the end of 1 Samuel. And Jonathan is Saul's son. Jonathan has a little 5-year-old boy. And so one of Jonathan's nurses decides, shoot, if Saul died and Jonathan died, they're going to come for this boy next. So she picks him up and she's going to run. She's going to take him somewhere else. But in that process, she's too much in a hurry. Stuff's going on. She drops him and breaks his legs. And the legs never set right to him. And so he ends up being a cripple. And that's what they tell David. They go, yeah, he's got a boy, but he's crippled. Okay. Where is he? Nowhere. He's in a place called Lo Debar, which just means no pasture. He's off the grid, man. Okay. I want you to go find him. Now Mephibosheth is the boy's name. It's a long name. But this is his nightmare. He's been waiting on this day forever, thinking that this is going to happen. And sure enough, when he wakes up one morning, he sees the 5 black Suburbans pulling up. Dude's getting out with the sunglasses and the earpieces and the guns. Sees him walk up to the door. Man, I knew this was going to come. Hobbles over to the door. Yes? You Jonathan's son? Yep. Need you to come with us. So they fly him back. And they walk in and get him in the White House. And David is in the Oval Office with his advisors. And he can hear that crutch coming down the hall. And David looks up and takes his glasses off. Kind of gives a half smile, half smirk. And he clears his office. And Jonathan comes, not Jonathan, scared. And David says, are you Jonathan's boy? Yes, sir. You know who I am? I do. Come in and have a seat. And he brings Mephibosheth in and he says, I want you to come and live with me. And I picture the boy just, I'm not sure if I heard you right. What? I want you to come and live with me. I want you to stay at my house with me, here in the White House. I just want you to stay here with me. I got a job for you all lined up. I got a room for you. I want you to be my family. I want you to eat at my table. You ever thought about who eats at David's table? A lot of very prominent people are at David's table, at least in the biblical history sense. You got Absalom. Absalom is, when it comes to physical features, perfection. He's got olive skin. He's got smooth skin. He's got long hair. Kind of looks like Channing Tatum, if you could picture that. Great body, always thinking about himself. 1 million followers on TikTok and Instagram. Great social influencer. And then he's got his other son, Solomon. Now, Solomon's not a big social media guy. Solomon is more into documentaries. Solomon's more into writing. Solomon kind of keeps to himself. But he's one of the smartest dudes out there. He's also got Joab. That's David's main general. Huge. Picture like The Rock mixed with 1980s Mike Tyson. Ferocious. Muscles bulging, covered in baby oil. That kind of person. Probably his wife, Abigail. Abigail's a brilliant strategist for David's campaigns. And she knows how to deal well with communication. These are the most important people in the land. And they're at David's table. And I picture David coming down and talking to his sons. Absalom, how you doing? How's whatever influencing stuff you're doing? Solomon, how's that book going? And then he hears that crutch coming down the hall. And this boy appears in the doorway, and David stops. And everybody turns and looks at this crippled kid. And David gets up, grabs a chair, and says, hey, I want you to come sit right next to me. Head of the table. And I picture Mephibosheth saying, man, I don't get it. Why are you doing this to me? because you don't deserve it. And let's be honest, I didn't either. But somebody gave it to me, so I'm giving it to you. To me, it's one of the prettiest love stories in the Bible. Unmerited grace, unmerited favor. Church, what do we do when we realize how blessed we are? I mean, we are a pretty blessed group of people. I think first we need to realize that is true. We are a very blessed group of people. But then I think we need to try and start figuring out ways that we can give thanks. And I don't mean that we can give it back to God, because that's pointless. God doesn't need it, and it's not going to win any favor with him, because we already are favored by God. So how do we give back? Here are some suggestions. What if we took time to make friends with somebody who needs a friend? What if we could help others that needed a hand, whether it be with food or a place to live? What if we could take a child out to eat? Now, these are all simple stuff. Let's get a bit deeper here. Can you forgive somebody who gossiped about you? Can you forgive a spouse who cheated on you? Now it gets a little harder. Can we listen to somebody's problems without condemning them for it? Can we give our time to somebody even if it's not convenient? Would a gracious life change how you interacted with people at your job? What if we took time to visit somebody who's in the hospital, even if we don't know them? Not because you know them, but just because you can, and because they need it. One of the oldest messages in the Bible is, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Mercy or grace is good in theory, but it doesn't work in our society, especially in a society that says you do you. When somebody ticks you off, cut them. Not cut them literally, don't do that, but cut them out of your life. You don't need them. They don't need you. They don't have to be friends with you. It's not your problem. Being gracious with your life isn't easy. It takes practice, and it takes focusing on it, because you're not going to be better at it starting tonight or tomorrow. It's going to take a while, because oftentimes you're just not going to feel like doing it. Somebody makes you mad, you don't want to talk to them. But fewer things show God's nature to the world more than grace. And that's what God calls us to do. We're supposed to show God to the world. It's not just talking about him, it's how you act. How do people see you? God's creation from day one walked out on him. They cheated on him, they left him, they ignored him, they made fun of him. So, when people do it to you, is your response like God, to continue to take them back? Or is your response like the world, to say, I don't need you, bye? God calls us to be like him, and to take them back, and to give them forgiveness, to give them grace, to give people an opening to be with us, to share the grace that we've been given. It's not just about being forgiving, it's about letting people into your life and letting them experience grace the way that we all have experienced grace. The world will come to know the grace of God only when his people put that grace on display. So, how will you let the grace that's been given you shape what you do from here on out? Let's all stand and sing.